Hello, everyone. It is Thursday night, which means it's like the best night ever because it's Mastery Chat Recap. And I am here with Chelsea, who I am so excited to talk to about her Mastery Chat topic because it was so amazing. I cannot wait. So stick with us and we will be right back. Hello. We are live after like the best chat ever.
Well, thank you. I always wanted to know what it was like to be on the other side while you're playing that video. I'm like, now I know all the secrets.
Yeah, you'll see like all the dancing that goes on behind the scenes. I swear one day we're gonna like record that and just like put that out for everyone to see. You know, everybody's like getting into the music. Love it.
Great.
So in case you are new here and do not know what we do on Thursday nights, we are here for Mastery Chat Recap because we just came from Mastery Chat over on Twitter and it was amazing. So I cannot wait to talk about everything grading and reimagining grading. Oh my gosh, I was so excited when I saw this happen. It was the best. But before we jump into that, Chelsea, can you introduce yourself? And, in case this is the first time that someone's maybe connecting with you, just tell us who you are, where you're from, what you do.
Sure, absolutely. I'm Chelsea Nicolino. I'm from Akron, Ohio. I'm an 8th grade science teacher, and new this year I teach 5th grade digital literacy as well. What do I do? I don't know. I'm married to an educator. My husband's also a principal in our district, and we have 2 kids, young ones. So if you hear them running around, actually they shouldn't be running around because it's 9 o'clock right now, but you never know. So that's about me.
That is awesome. We have so many people popping in. We've got Caitlin here. We've got Dave, who is still fangirling. I mean, I know he says 2 of his faves, but he's really all about you right now. Like, I know grading was just, here we go. Best
He's all over.
And we've got, his thumbs are sore from that epic chat. It truly was. It was. Holly is here.
Hi, Holly.
It was so great. I love talking grading. So I am, and you and I feel like connect on Instagram all the time and
Yes.
on social media, but like we've talked on Instagram. So I feel like I know you, but this is our first time like going live together. So
I know. It's like I know you, but we've never met in person. Like most of the Teach Better team, I guess. But
I know that's super true. I feel like that's what I say to everybody nowadays. I'm like, I feel like I really know you, but I mean, I've never actually met you yet.
Right.
Andrea's here with us. Oh my gosh, this chat was, it was amazing. Like, again, I know I said that a million times, but it was so great. I love the topic. I feel like it's always an important topic, but even more so now because things have shifted and a lot of people are still virtual. A lot of people are going to be virtual all year. A lot of people are hybrid and sometimes they're in person and sometimes, they're at home and they're virtual. So it's obviously been a weird year and, that's changed a lot. So I love the conversation about maybe how that's changed grading and what it looks like. How are you feeling after this chat?
I am feeling the love. I'm feeling like I'm so pumped up. I texted my husband halfway through and we're just like, oh my gosh, so many people showed up. Because, there's always like that weird feeling you have. Or like, what if no one comes? But no, I was feeling the love from the Teach Better team, everyone. I felt like it went really well. And I was so excited because some of the questions that I asked, like, I know what my answer is, but then putting that out there into the world, how some other people interpreted the questions, it was such a reflective chat too. So I just loved it. Feeling the love.
I think that's always one of my favorite parts when it comes to Mastery Chat is always just seeing how people answer. And I think that And it happens all the time, but I think specifically with this chat, with the way that people answered, and just I think how the Teach Better team is and the Teach Better family is, and Mastery Chat, like it opens so many conversations, but they're positive conversations. And they're like, I mean, they're really just learning conversations. It's always kind of taken into a positive route of, you know, okay, how do you view grading and how does that work? How do you make that work in your classroom? Because I'm sure, you know, I was reading some things and I was like, And at first sometimes I want to be like, oh, that wouldn't work for me, but it can. And I think that was the beauty of tonight, was just reading these responses, getting into those conversations. And I'm so excited to like go back and scroll through, because I know I like missed some things. So I can't wait to just kind of go back and be able to comment.
Right. I know it's such a whirlwind, because like refresh, and like you're going through and I'm like, did I get everyone? And you want to comment on everything, but there's just not enough time. So it was great.
It's true. We've got Livia here. We've got Jeff here. I feel like Jeff needs to include in his like instructions when, you know, when you're signing up for Mastery Chat, he needs to tell you to like stretch your fingers on the day of. Like really work out, because you're really going to be like, it's going to be going real fast. So you need to get that finger workout in. Yes, I agree with Holly. I hope we can all meet in person. Hopefully soon. So, here's another Dave Scott. And again, I totally agree. It is such an important conversation. It truly is, and it needs to happen. And I think that this was just one chat that really opened those doors to having all of those conversations, because they need to be happening, and they don't happen enough sometimes.
I agree.
Or they happen within your building, which is great, but it's all about the different perspectives and the different ideas. So I love talking to people from kind of all over the place and hearing what everybody actually says. I agree. That's when I can really like later on go back and read and comment, because as it's going, I'm like on question 2 and I'm reading responses and it's like question 4. I'm like, oh no.
Right.
But now I've missed all of it. So what were you thinking when you signed up for Mastery Chat? You're creating these questions. What were you kind of thinking as you were creating them?
So what was it? I feel like I signed up in Mastery Chat for like back in October. They were like, hey, you want to do Mastery Chat? I'm like, sure. I'm thinking like it's going to happen like a month from now. And it's like the next available date's in March. I'm like, okay, cool. So at the time, like I'm getting my master's right now. I'll graduate in May, and we had to do a project. So of course, this year, big thing on my mind was grading practices. I'm like, okay, my school building that I work at, we're all about mastery learning, mastery grading. We've been trained by Chad in the grid method. And I was like, okay, next step, grading practices. And I guess standards-based grading was always on my mind. And actually, Caitlin Giordano and Dave Schmittou have been a huge support system for me through this whole process, because I was like, okay, like this will be easy. Like there's point A, point B, we'll get there. And I remember, I think it was back in January, I'd emailed Dave and I'm like, Dave, I have more questions than I have answers. I need help. I don't know what to do, because I'm getting my admin license. So I was like, okay, you have an admin mind and you wear that admin hat, and you know how like it's hard to get people on board and getting the buy-in and everything, especially like this year. My school district is 100% remote. So we had to completely flip our instruction. And I mean, the teachers in our district have been doing amazing reimagining everything. But I was also thinking like, grading practices, I'll go right in. And, we have so many responsibilities and, different things that we're doing this year. I didn't want to be that person that added one more thing on top of it. So Dave has been fantastic and like, listen, this isn't going to be like, you tie a big bow on it in May when your project's done. He's like, this is going to be like a 3 to 5 year thing. And I'm like, okay, I'm in it for the long haul. So that helps settle my nerves. I'm like, am I doing something wrong? So these questions that I generated were kind of from my research, the books I've read, questions that have popped up throughout this whole process. And I was talking to Elijah in the chat one time. He's like, I don't know if I took your question the right way. And I'm like, no, you did it perfectly. Because one of the questions was on who are grades intended for? And I had never asked myself that question. I was like, it's for the students and their parents. But I wanted to see what everyone else thought, because Thomas Guskey, I've read a couple of his books. That's what he says, you should start asking before you start changing your grading practices. And I thought that was kind of interesting. So a lot of great answers with that tonight.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. And I just, I love that you also say like, it really is a 3 to 5 year process. This isn't something that you can walk in and just flip a switch and everything changes. But it's worth that process because you truly, as you start changing, and I think it's something too where you're not just going to walk in and be like, I'm going to do this and this is going to work and it's going to be perfect forever. It's like everything else in teaching. We change things as we go and we make them better and we figure out what works for us. But I think that that's super important too. When I was reading some of your questions, I was like, I've never asked myself this question. I've been teaching for 9 years. Oh, I don't know, probably something I should have asked myself before. But it's something that, and one of your questions too is about, it's kind of like why, I forget how you worded it, but it was something about like, why are grades personal to us? And I was like, it's so true though. Like when I started, I did what I knew. Does not mean it was right by any means. And it doesn't mean it was necessarily wrong. It's just, I was doing what I knew and now I know better. So now I do better. And I think that's what I loved about your chat was really just kind of getting to hear all perspectives. And again, kind of like Janice says, I love hearing from people outside of my district because I do talk to my district a lot. And I know, how a lot of the teachers on my team grade and things like that. So seeing some outside perspectives and even what is done maybe in different districts around it is phenomenal. Brad's here. Brad says, well,
Brad.
And Dave's going to throw a question at you.
Oh man.
Why do you think this conversation is taboo in so many schools? And I love this question because I think he's completely right. It is.
It is. Oh man, I know. When I first got into this, I didn't think it was that big of a taboo topic. But like even like talking to my colleagues and everything too, it is. It's such a personal. Grading is such a personal thing. And some people brought up in the chat too, like maybe grading practices are personal because our job is personal and we deal with students, and you don't want to think that what you're doing your grading practices with students are harming them, because that would be a reflection on you that you're doing something, I guess, wrong. I think that's why it's such a taboo. No one wants to admit that you're doing something to harm students, and no one wants to think their grading practices are harmful. And like you said, I know my first year teaching, I want to go back to all the students like, I am so sorry. I didn't know any better at the time. I know a lot better now. I shouldn't have given you that 7-page test. I thought that was like helping you, but I know it's not. So, and now I give like short little quizzes and short little assessments because I know that's better for my students and better for me to assess where they're at in their learning. So I think, to answer your question, Dave, I think it's such a taboo because no one wants to admit when they're wrong. And it's such a personal thing. And I did love that somebody brought up that in the chat that our profession is personal. We deal with students, we deal with children, like it's personal to everybody.
I could not have said that any better. I completely agree. It is very personal. And so I think that, and again, you and I have said, I agree with you. I wish I could go back to my first group of kids and be like, I am so sorry. And it's not, we did what we knew and now we know better. And so I think that that's the huge thing is that grading is, people tend to take things very personally and they feel very criticized and they don't want to feel like they're, like you said, they don't want to feel like what they're doing is wrong for their kids. And so I think that makes it sometimes a very difficult conversation. I also think sometimes there are people who think because they've done it for so many years, this is the way we've always done it, that this is the way it is. And so I think that sometimes can be very taboo because then it feels like you're attacking the way that things have always been done. And that can be difficult. I think that, obviously we know just because it's the way it's always been done doesn't mean it's the right way. You do what you do until you know to do better. And then hopefully you do better. And
exactly.
Again, that's, I think, what matters. We're better now. So it's fine. It takes a few, those first few years were a little rough, but that's fine. Those kids still learned a lot.
Yeah.
And Holly says exactly that. Like it gives you this mastery chat, and all mastery chats really give you the different perspectives. I will say this one was one of my favorites. It really is. And I agree with Brad. I feel like I just want to shout you out and tell you how amazing you are. The fact that you are getting your master's, you have taken on this journey in grading all while in a pandemic. I don't know that I would go and get my master's for my admin. Like, it seems like a really great idea in a normal year. And like, you're taking this on with 2 little kids while in a pandemic. Like, you are just my hero, just in case you're wondering.
Oh, thank you, Megan.
Again, this kind of goes back to, it does. It's when you can point out what might not be the best for kids, that's going to force people to change. And there's a lot of people that like their ways of doing things and they don't want to do anything differently. Exactly. 95% of what we do is good. Like Dave says, when we change grading practices, it's not always about fixing something that's bad. It's just trying to do better. And it doesn't mean you're going to throw away everything that you do. And it really doesn't even mean that you feel the wrong way or you have the wrong ideas about grading. Sometimes it's just translating really how you feel and what you're thinking about grading, and like having that be what comes out of it, I think is the hard part sometimes, which is something I totally struggle with because I do not do standards-based grading. But in my mind, like, that's the way my mind works. So sometimes I get stuck in and I'm like, oh, nope, we're not doing that. I don't want to give a 100-point test. That's not where we're at. That's not what we need.
Right.
And yeah, that's why it's so hard to change, because it's not bad people who don't feel compelled to change. Yep. I completely agree. So Chelsea, what were you hoping that people would get from this chat?
I was hoping, it sounds like a lot of people got this from the chat, I was just hoping to kind of like drop that seed, that thought in about maybe different ways to maybe improve grading practices. Like kind of like the know better, when you know better, you do better kind of thing. I was really excited about the question of, because I wanted to know different ways to include my students in the grading process. And some amazing answers came out of this. People were sharing resources. Like I know Libya suggested I think it was the 1-point rubric, which I'm currently trying to do in my class as well. So it was just really exciting to see different perspectives and how everyone else is doing different things. And I think it was Andrea commented, the last question was, what are some of your tips and tricks for feedback? She's like, I'm excited because I want to know what everyone else's tips and tricks for feedback is. And I know some people are also saying like grading digitally this year has been, and I know a lot of people are like, oh, grading digitally, it's a lot quicker. But I saw some people were really reflective in that. And they're like, it takes so much time because you're typing out personalized feedback. You're not just blanketing it in the bow, like, nice job, so-and-so, or things like that. And I was like, yes. So it was, I loved how much reflective everyone was. And that's kind of been like my project too. Thank you, Holly. And that's kind of been my project too, is like, take what you can. Don't dive straight into a whole new grading practice. Do it little by little. I mean, that's what I've been trying in my classroom. And if things work, great. If things don't work, I'm like, oh, don't do that again. And then you can tell other people like, don't do that. That didn't work for me, but it might work for you. So it's kind of like, mastery learning, or even the grid method. I mean, most of my building practices at least some elements of the grid method in their classroom. And we all do it in our own little ways, and it's kind of personalized in that way. So it's kind of cool to see how grading practices are like evolved and diversified throughout different classrooms.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it is very different in every classroom, and not everybody has to do the exact same thing all the time to be right or to be doing what's best for the kids. I cannot wait to go back and reread that question about the tips and tricks, because I'm like, give me all the tips and tricks so that I can just keep, putting more things in my toolbox and having more resources, because grading is definitely a focus kind of for me moving forward, in terms of, I love some of what I do and I don't love some of what I do. So it's, slowly trying to transition and find things that work in my classroom that, work for my kids and work for me. And I agree with what Olivia says here. Really, it does make such a difference when you have people in your senior admin that really have the vision for change, because that kind of connects to what Brad was saying too, is even though we know better and our grading and reporting systems continue to validate and prioritize grades, the system change is very slow. And it is, and it's hard when you maybe don't have the support, or you have pushback and things that can make the change even more difficult. And I feel like to a lot of people, the grading change already seems very overwhelming. So I love what you said about it's baby steps. It's like anything that we would do. Anytime we're changing anything, baby steps. Take one tiny piece and try it. If you don't like it, it doesn't work, either, make your changes and fix it, or scrap it and try something different. It's, not everything's going to be perfect the first time we try it. And it's not going to be like I found this today, let's try it tomorrow and it's going to be perfect and be the solution. So I love that. I love everything you've said. And yep, it's a learning process for both teachers and students.
Yes.
I learn kids every day. Yeah, I could not agree with this too. I love how on board your school is with things. That is awesome. And your teachers too. That's awesome. It makes a world of difference, I feel like.
It absolutely does.
I'm going to throw one or two of your questions at you and have you answer them. I know you answered them in the chat, but I'd love to kind of talk through them and maybe see if any of your answers have been tweaked a little bit by some of the things that you've seen. How do you think, I forget exactly how you worded this, but how do you think that our grading practices have changed with the year that we've been given? I know you said your district is fully remote and has been all year, right?
Right. Yep.
So how do you, if it has, how do you think our grading practices have changed?
I know my own grading practices have changed because I was trying to move kind of more into that, I guess, point system where everything's more standardized, I guess. And I was struggling with this, and I reached out to Caitlin Giordano, and she so graciously shared with me her proficiency rubric. And it's on a 10-point scale because she's also working with a traditional percentage grading system, because I just couldn't wrap my mind around it, because all other standards-based grading is a 4-3-2-1 model, and that just didn't work in the online grading system that I use. So I changed everything to 10 points, and I was like, all right, we'll see how this goes. And it has been great because not only do my students understand every time I give them a 10, I'm like, this is mastery, you have hit this target. Or even if they're at an 8, that means that they're approaching. So they're getting more personalized feedback in that way too. I mean, of course, if they don't reach mastery, I provide them feedback on how to earn mastery or achieve mastery. But that's how my grading practices have changed. It's really made me focused. And this year was the first year I fully used Google Classroom. My school used to use Blackboard. Now we're using Google Classroom. And just finding those tips and tricks, especially the rubric option, has been a game changer for me. And I've really, as I guess Ray would say, cut the fluff and really focused on every learning opportunity my students do. Yes, Caitlin really does roll. And she couldn't be here tonight. She told me she had a volleyball game, and I'm like, no. I was like, I forgive you, but I was like,
she's probably real upset to have missed this.
I know. That's what she said. I'm like, it's okay. But going through Google Classroom and really finding those ways to really be intentional about the learning opportunities I provide my students that align to a learning target, and is this really what I want them to achieve? Not just doing the lesson just to do a lesson kind of thing. So that's how my grading practices have changed.
That's awesome. It's hard to take I feel a really good look at that and be like, all right, like you said, cut the fluff. There is fluff, but I think that if anything, this year has helped because I feel like we just have less time. We in my district, we started a week late because we were going full remote, and it was kind of a last minute decision. So we had a week of planning and, here and there with time, and we've changed schedules. And so I feel like really I'm there this year too. I'm like, all right, no more fluff. What do we need, and what do we need to know, and how do we build from there? So I agree with you on that. It's been, and I think feedback over grades has been such a blessing right now, that so many people feel that way. And I hope that kind of continues, because truly your grades should be everything your kids, like you said, your kids understand when they get a score, what that means to them. They should know exactly where they're at before they see that in a grade book, or before, that should just be something that you need to do for them because you need to do it. They should already know exactly where they're at in your class and where they're at on their learning path, which it sounds like your kids have a very good handle on.
I hope so. I think they do.
It sounds like they do. I'm going to go ahead and say they do. So what And I loved your last question. And of course, I'm going to totally go back and be rereading all of these answers. But what tips and tricks do you have that you could share with us about feedback?
Ooh, well, I listen to a bunch of podcasts, but I recently listened to a podcast and it was all about student-led conferences, which I used to when we were in person. I would conference with every single student, every single class period. And like you said, I only see my students every other day. So I've been really intentional about my time. So I guess some of the tips I've used is kind of flipping it on the student. Like, what grade do you think you have earned, or have you reached this learning target? Why or why not? And even on the end of my quizzes, I always have like kind of like a little like self-grading scale where it's they rate their self on the rubric where, do you think you mastered? Do you think you're beginning in their learning? And they're brutally honest of themselves. I had a student last week when they took their quiz for their end of level quiz in the grid, and they said, I'm beginning. And they weren't beginning. they were close to mastery. And I'm just like, you're not like, only getting 1 out of 8 questions right. So they're like brutally honest of themselves too, which has been great for that self assessment. I think that has been truly eye-opening, especially since I'm not in the same space as them this year with being remote. So getting any chance that I get to conference with them one-on-one, either in a breakout room or in a Google Meet during office hours or something, has been great for me, at least for providing feedback. Or they've been actually very open online. I was kind of worried about that because I was like, oh, when you're in person, do students open up more? But I've kind of have found, being online too, they don't have to worry about other students listening in on them. And like, you're truly like in a space together talking, and it's kind of a private conversation, that they've been very open. So I think that has been great. So I'm going to try to see if I can, use that when we go back in person in a couple weeks as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Livia agrees. And I agree too. I think it's almost funny to me sometimes how honest they are about where they're at. And I agree. Sometimes they put themselves lower than they really are. I'm like, no, you've mastered this, or you're approaching this. So I think that I love that is they truly, and I teach 7th grade, so maybe it's just because they're still like younger, but they are just so honest about where they're at. And I love it because that's something that being able to identify where they're at in their learning and what they need to work on or what they're struggling with, that is phenomenal. So I love to keep just building that with them and making sure that they know that that is something they should always be voicing and be honest about. So I love that. We need to chat student conferences one day, because I need to. I really need to. And I mean, like, I do, but I need to do it more. And I feel like I need to do it more, formally, maybe kind of, and figure out how that works. Because sometimes I struggle with how some of it works in math.
Right.
And I know it does. I know it absolutely does. So I need to, I need to talk more about that.
Yes.
I agree. I'm super jealous that you get to work with Chelsea. I mean, I don't teach science, but like, I'd still like to go work with her. So I would love it. Yeah.
Awesome.
See, we need a student conference chat. That just needs to happen. I do, think that there might be something about conferencing in the Teach Better Academy, but we could also, have a chat. I love it.
Right.
We are definitely going to do that. And yeah, Andrea, I know she's all about her in-person conferences too. And it's hard. We use Zoom. And so we can't use breakout rooms because they don't record. So like I have a co-teacher, so I can use one, which makes it easier for me. Andrea doesn't have that. So it makes it a little bit more difficult. So I think there's that, trying to figure out, how we can still student conference, even half of our kids are virtual, half of them are in person. So
right.
How that fits in. And Olivia is saying, speaking of feedback, last week she asked her students for feedback on her teaching. So informative. It made me better already this week. That is one of my favorite things to do. I love it.
Me too. I haven't done it in a while. Maybe I'll do that this week.
I know. I'm like, glad you said that, Olivia, because it's been a while. But I think that's super important too, because I think that makes your students more open to feedback. When you ask them for feedback about you and they're like, I get to be honest about you.
Right.
It makes, it opens that door of, yeah, we are all about the honesty here. And that's really, and I always tell them, whenever I'm giving feedback, I'm like, it's all love. I mean this in the most loving way possible, but sometimes like you got to know where you're at, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You're going to know where you're at because we got to know what you want to work on. Got to know what do you need to work on to be better. So I love that feedback for us too. I think that's so, so important. Yeah. Modeling. And sometimes people are like afraid to do that because they're afraid of what the kids are going to say. Because I mean, kids are super honest, but they are. I think my favorite part about the feedback though is they're telling you what they need more of. Like, yes, they're giving you feedback about you, but they're really voicing what they need, because in telling you what maybe could be better or would work better for them is really them being an advocate for themselves of what they need more of from you. So I love that so much.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was just looking at my feedback from my students a couple months ago, I asked, I think, and I was just like, my favorite question is like, how can I be a better science teacher? And I think a lot of them are like, well, I've never had anybody ask that question before. So, I mean, so you're right. Some of them are brutally honest, but I mean, it's really not, I mean, it's like in a middle school way, like sometimes they have no filter, but I was like, I understand, I can do that for you. So. Or sometimes it's like, we need to have more snacks in class. I'm like, well, okay, well.
Oh yeah, I definitely get the less homework, less tests and quizzes. I'm like,
yeah.
Really? So I always preface this with please don't put less tests and quizzes. First of all, you don't really have that many. Second of all, I mean, what does your assessment tell me? And they're like, well, we know. I'm like, exactly. You know the purpose. I'm not just like, let's test because we have nothing to do today. And it sounds like fun. That's awesome. Yeah, it's giving them that voice in the classroom, and that just can change a lot and have them very open to everything. Feedback on your grids and on your instruction. I do the exact same thing.
Yep, same here.
Holly, I don't know. I think I would have to argue that 7th graders are the best.
I love 8th grade. They have my heart. I love 8th graders. But I love my 5th graders too. So if any of them are watching today, I love you too. Oh, they're so sweet.
I don't know. 5th grade might be a little young for me. I don't know if I could go younger than 6th grade. I've really only, I mean, I taught 8th grade a little, but I've been in 7th grade for so long. Yes, that is, I agree with this. It's that, and one of your questions really brought this out too, of that fixed mindset can be difficult sometimes, whether it's with grading, feedback, how things are going. So I think that that's super important, is that, and we kind of mentioned that before with, maybe people who are set in their ways. It's that fixed mindset, and it's trying to, change that to the growth mindset. Sometimes that's why it's so taboo too. One student said she hates reflection. It can be difficult. It's very time consuming to make that shift. Like grading, like anything else, it takes that time to kind of build that and make that shift.
Absolutely.
It's great.
And practice makes perfect.
Exactly. You're just being better every day, which is exactly what it's about. Every time you make a mistake or fail, you're just figuring out what didn't work so you could make it better, make it work, and be better.
Right.
See, tied that in there. Better see a bunch
of. Did you say better?
I did say better. Chelsea, thank you so much for joining me after. Your chat was phenomenal. I cannot wait to go back and read. It was going so fast I couldn't keep up, which that's when that's when it's going to be a great chat, is when when you're going so fast you can't even keep up with anything. It was, first of all, it was awesome to go live with you and get to meet you, but not in person yet, even though we've talked a lot.
I know. One day.
It will come one day, and we'll have to talk student conferencing at some point too. We'll have to do that.
Yes.
Because that will be fun. Thank you so much. You did a phenomenal job. Love your chat. Love your questions. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to everyone who joined us in the chat. Thank you to everyone who joined us now live. If you missed the chat, you can still go back and answer the questions. You can still go back and read them all. You definitely want to, because there were some really great conversations happening. We cannot wait to see you next Thursday for another Mastery Chat and another Mastery Chat recap. Have a phenomenal night. Have a really great weekend, a great Friday, and we will see you all later.